In this lesson, we'll be solving quadratic functions by factoring. So you should be able to solve them and make connections between the x-intercept solutions and zeros. So factoring, we know we have tons of choices for factoring. So you can factor out the GCF. So when the GCF is greater than 1, you can factor by grouping. Of course, that's when there are 4 terms. You can factor using product sum, what 2 terms multiplied together to equal C and add together equal B. We usually use this when our coefficient A is 1. You can do math, multiply A and C when our coefficient A is a large number. We can do difference of squares when the first term is a perfect square, there's no middle term, and the last term is perfect square. Or we can find a perfect square trinomial when the first and last terms are perfect squares, and the middle is 2 times the square root of the first term times the square root of the last term. And then we can use the square root property. When we solve by factoring, we have to factor the polynomial completely, and then set each one to 0, solve for the variable, and then plug it back in and make sure it's correct. Then we've got our vertical motion problems. So we write an equation by substituting the values for velocity and our initial height. We factor it, set each equation to 0, and solve. Use this information to sketch a graph and label it. So for some examples, we write the equation in standard form and then solve. So in this first one, we're going to start by adding 9x to both sides. It gets us x squared plus 5x minus 2 equals 4. Subtract 4 from both sides, and we get x squared plus 5x minus 6. So we'll factor that to x plus 6 and x minus 1. Set them both to 0. Negative 6. So our solutions, negative 6 and 1. In the second one, we're going to add x squared to both sides. That gets us 3x squared minus 18x plus 48 equals 6x. Subtract 6x from both sides. And we get 3x squared minus 24x plus 48 equals 0. I see a GCF there, so I'm going to pull that out. X squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. Now I can factor it. That's a perfect square trinomial, so that's x minus 4 times x minus 4 equals 0. I only need to set one of them to 0, so x minus 4 equals 0. So add 4 to both sides, and we get x equals 4. So my answer is just 4. Find the value of x as it relates to each triangle or rectangle. So we have our rectangle here. X times 2x minus 8 equals 234. Distribute 2x squared minus 8x minus 234 equals 0. I factor it, 2x minus 26 and x plus 9. Set them both to 0. I get 2x minus 26 equals 0. 2x equals 26. X equals 13. X plus 9 equals 0. X equals negative 9. So I know that x cannot be negative, so x equals 13. And this one, to get the area of a triangle, it's 1/2 base times height. So I'm going to do the base times height. Over 2. Multiply both sides by 2, and I get x times 2x plus 1. sorry, I lost my 1 there. 2x plus x equals 300. Sorry, 2x plus 1, x times 2x plus 1 equals 300. Sorry. So now I'm going to distribute and get 2x squared plus x equals 300. Subtract the 300 from both sides. Two x squared plus x minus 300 equals 0. Factor that, 2x plus 25 and x minus 12. Set them both to 0. 2x plus 25 equals 0. 2x equals negative 25. X equals negative 12 and a half. But we know we can't have a negative. So x minus 12 equals 0. So x is equal to 12. Back up here, x equals 12. All right, let's do a velocity problem. A ball is thrown vertically upward from the top of the building, 96 feet tall. So here we are at 96. And it's going to go up and then back down. It has an initial velocity of 80. So we use our velocity equation and put negative 16 t squared plus 80 t plus 96 equals 0. We're going to factor out the negative 16 and get t squared plus 5t, minus 6. We'll factor that, negative 16, x minus 6, x plus 1. So we'll set those both to 0. So x can be 6 or negative 1. So we know it can't be negative 1. So we know that this is here. And so it takes 6 seconds for it to hit the ground. Now, how many seconds will the ball reach its maximum height? So I want to know this maximum height, which is the vertex. So to find the vertex, we know it's negative b over 2a. So that's negative 80 over 2 times negative 16. So that's negative 80 over negative 16, which is 2.5 seconds. And we can see from the graph, it is 2.5 seconds. The domain is going to be from 0 to 6, because it started at 0. Remember, we started up here at the top of the building. It includes both of those. And our range is 0 to 196. I got the 196 by plugging this 2.5 seconds in for x and finding the vertex. So how do you solve a quadratic equation by factoring? Well, we know there's tons of different ways. There's GCF, there's grouping and product sum, difference of squares. How does the factored form allow you to determine the solution? Because we use the zero product property.